I was never a Sega kid. I jumped from the NES to the SNES to the N64, loyal to Nintendo throughout most of my youth, but the lure of Sega's sleek, white GD-ROM playing spaceship was enough to convince me that it was time to give in to the Dreamcast. If only my 8-year-old self could have seen me at that point, he'd have been disgusted at my treacherous behaviour. But my time with the Dreamcast was, like the console itself, all too brief. I actually only bought it a few months before Sega called time on it, and soon everyone had begun to move on to the PS2. And it was over as soon as it had begun. But no console burned as brightly in its limited shelf time as the Sega Dreamcast. Look at those other console failures, the 3DO, the Virtual Boy, the Jaguar. The real quality in the libraries for those machines is almost non-existent, whereas the Dreamcast, it has solid gold in its archives. Absolute all-time classics, 128 bits of greatness. I traded in my entire N64 library to get a Dreamcast, mint-in-box titles that I would absolutely kill to have right now. But I don't regret it, because the Dreamcast was responsible for some of my favourite moments in my own gaming history. One of those moments isn't even a game. We didn't have the internet at home because we didn't have a family PC capable of such things, but my Dreamcast, however, did have the internet. No page looked right due to the Dreamcast having exactly one font in one size, but it didn't matter. A purchase of a 5-metre long network cable later, and I had the bloody internet. A window into this fascinating world of information, wrestling spoilers, and hardcore pornography. I would wait until I heard my parents go upstairs to bed, and I would run this enormous network cable from my console out of the bedroom door, across the length of the next room, and plug it into the nearest phone socket. The thing is, it ended up costing a fucking fortune. We didn't have an ISP as was needed at the time, so we were likely being charged by the megabyte or something, but this didn't matter to me. I needed to look up that game FAQ, and a bollocking at some point in the future certainly wasn't going to stop me there and then. Some of us more enterprising Dreamcast users would wire their console through their VHS recorder, which essentially granted you the ability to tape the internet for use at a later date. Whether that be a crucial piece of information for a game that you were having trouble with, or filling a Memorex with loads of smut. I heard about it. The online was a key factor in why I bought a Dreamcast, but not for the grot light, but for the far sexier Phantasy Star Online. It's the first online game I ever played, and it's the first online community I was part of, and I've told this story a million times on various podcast streams and in articles. But there was a magic to that time period that is lost forever. We had no mobile phones or no instant messaging, so my mate Matt and I had to make a pact every evening whilst at school or at college. Midnight, on this server, in this block. That was the deal. Midnight would usually ensure that both our respective parents would be in bed and asleep, giving us a chance to run those network cables to the nearest phone lines and get online. Being sat in that lobby at 5 past, 10 past, just waiting to see if they'll turn up before running some levels for a couple of hours. The amount of times I'd show up to college on fucking 3 hours sleep because we were on a good run of ruins on hard, it probably does a fair bit of explaining why my A-levels weren't up to so much. It was a genuine addiction, the kind that you hear about with World of Warcraft and all that noise. No MMORPG has gotten its hooks into me like Phantasy Star Online did, and I don't think any ever will. It was the future, a true generational leap. I was in my late teens when I got my own Dreamcast, and although I didn't have my own PC to access the internet, I had close friends who did, and this allowed us to look online and find guides and help that was needed to try and get better at the games that we all played against one another. Street Fighter Alpha 2 on the Saturn lit the touch paper, but having access to games like Street Fighter 3, Mark of the Wolves and Soul Calibur, well, that was really my first taste of proper competitive fighting games. Not in regards to the then fledgling FGC, we lived nowhere near any town, never mind an arcade or any scene, but we all played each other a lot, and we all wanted to get better than one another. So we looked stuff up, largely on game FAQs, and then we tried to pull it off in matches. It was the first time I understood what was going on under the hood in a fighting game, rather than just that basic surface level, and it's stuck with me ever since. The Dreamcast also had ports, which admittedly varied quite wildly in quality, of PC titles, which gave me a taste of that classic era of early 3D graphics card titles. I played Quake 3 Arena, a game that at one point was the very pinnacle of visual fidelity, online against other players, on my Dreamcast. And that might sound trivial now, but you have to understand, everyone else had a PS1 or an N64, at the very best a PS2, and that still didn't do that. Well, not yet anyway. And it might sound daft, but having stuff like MDK2, Unreal Tournament, and even stuff like Hidden and Dangerous rubbing shoulders with Sega's library of arcade classics was just another thing that made the Dreamcast feel really special. Like it was so much more than the consoles that came before it. And it probably started my awful habit of playing highly regarded PC games on consoles throughout the DC and PS2 period. Shout out to my PS2 Deus Ex crew. One of the main reasons, however, that I was able to play so many incredible games during my time with the Dreamcast is one of the main reasons why the machine's life was so short-lived. It was astoundingly easy to get hold of copied games and play them on the console. And this, coupled with having access to magazines and the internet that talked up import-only releases, and for the first time in my life having some disposable income, it led me to seek out obscure and interesting titles whenever I could. Getting my hands on Fire Pro Wrestling D and Giant Gram 2000 was hugely important on helping my love of Japanese pro wrestling blossom, and without Piracy there's no way on earth I would have been able to check those out. It wasn't something I had a massive amount of access to, but just having the option to be able to source an Ikaruga or a Third Strike while previously import titles were practically unreachable to me was incredible. There was also the slightly less illegal Bleamcast emulation discs. These allowed you to play specific PS1 games on your Dreamcast, with an extra added bit of texture filtering thrown in for good measure. And again, it's just another thing that made you think that the Dreamcast was this all-in-one mega console. I could borrow my brother's Metal Gear Solid discs and play them. I had the Metal Gear Solid one and the Tekken 3 Bleam discs. 2 top-tier games from the PS1, playable on my new Sega machine. Again, just mind-blowing at the time, and eventually nipped in the bud very quickly by Sony. And of course you can't talk about the Dreamcast without talking about Sega's own line of titles. The PS1, Sega Saturn, and to some extent the Neo Geo had already shown the world what it was like to have near arcade perfect titles in their home, but that wasn't good enough for the Dreamcast. Titles like Virtua Fighter 3, Crazy Taxi, or Virtua Tennis, they weren't arcade perfect. They were better than the arcade versions. And then you had titles like Jet Set Radio, which felt like they came from an arcade cabinet which never existed in the first place. The whole Sega Blue Skies concept, well, that was the Dreamcast's identity. It was at its core, and it was something that you couldn't get anywhere else. There's so many good games on the Dreamcast that there's no way I'm going to be able to mention them all in this video. I'm having to reduce amazing titles like Bangai-O and Choo Choo Rocket, Metropolis Street Racer, Power Stone, oh god, Lack of Love, just incredible video games that are worthy of their own videos on this channel. And I'm just having to squeeze them in. And while I'm at it, what about the fact that the Dreamcast usually had the best version of multi-platform games? Resident Evils, Dino Crisis, Alone in the Dark, Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, all best versions on the Dreamcast. Didn't have the biggest library when compared to the PlayStations of the world, but it was dense with quality, packed tight. But no game sums up the Dreamcast more so than Shemu. Much like the console itself, it was ambitious, beautiful, unique, and completely doomed from the very beginning. I recently replayed the game, and unsurprisingly it has aged a bit in its years since its release, but you have to understand though, there was nothing like this. The sheer level of detail, the sheer amount of things to do, no matter how tedious or minor, it was presenting this glimpse of the future of gaming that never actually materialised in the end, and there was nothing else on any system that was even close to this in regards to scope. Hell, there was nothing else on the market that was close. But like most cutting edge games, the edge has shifted considerably, and those things that were revolutionary and mind-blowing are now awkward and even a bit backward. But despite all of this, Shemu still has a certain something. It has a charm that means that all of it somehow works as a whole. The deliberate slow pace and the small but dense scale of the game area means that you get to know it all intimately by the time that you're done with it. and the atmosphere of the backstreets and the shopping area still makes it feel like a real, if slightly weird, place to explore. And that's the main thing about Shemu that is timeless. Dobrita Street and the surrounding areas are a real place. You can go visit them. And they were captured on this disc, a moment in time, frozen and accessible at any point. It's a memorable, endearing slice of virtual life that occasionally asks you to kick the fuck out of some goons, play a bit of Space Harrier, or go ask around about some sailors. And the forklift stuff is actually fine, so don't worry about it. And one day, Ria Hazuki is going to walk back through the gates of the Hazuki estate, and Fuku-san's face, when he sees him return home, is probably going to be what fucking kills me. Happy 25th anniversary, Dreamcast. Alright everyone, as always, thank you so much for watching the video. A cool 25th anniversary of the Dreamcast to make you all feel old. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel or any of the things I do, be it the streams or any other daft creative endeavour, Patreon page, you can see it on screen, $2 a month, and it's much appreciated. If you want to join the Discord and become part of the community around this stuff that I make, hit me up on Twitter or Blue Sky. You can find me. Just send me a message saying that you want in and we'll make it happen. Anyway, cheers, I'll see you next time.